In this video, we will discuss Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, by Ibram X. Kendi. Before we get to the takeaways and summary, here is a brief overview of the book. Historian Ibram X. Kendi offers an exhaustive, gripping portrayal of the complex, heartbreaking history of racism in the United States. Kendi traces the progress of racism and anti-racism in philosophy, politics, science, law and popular culture over 5 periods in American history, as seen through the lens of a significant thinker of each period. His account emphasizes the cause and effect connections between ideas and policies. A National Book Award winner and New York Times bestseller, Kendi's history has earned its place on the bookshelves of historians, activists and engaged Americans. Now let's see some of the main takeaways from this text. 1. Racist ideas result from the desire to discriminate. They don't cause discrimination. 2. Racism in America has run along 2 tracks: assimilationism and segregationism. 3. Anti-racism has made strides in America, but so has racism. 4. 3 main strategies to eradicate racist ideas have all failed. 5. Racist ideas came to America with the first British colonizers. 6. The most celebrated abolitionists and anti-racists in American history have themselves harbored racist ideas. 7. Barack Obama's election as America's president didn't transform the United States into a post-racial society. 8. Cotton Mather, Thomas Jefferson, William Lloyd Garrison, W.E.B. Du Bois and Angela Davis helped shape America's racial history. 9. The notion of black inferiority is a convenient excuse for racist policies and attitudes. Finally, let's discuss the summary of the book in greater depth. Racist ideas result from the desire to discriminate. They don't cause discrimination. Many people believe that ignorance and hate led to racist ideas, which in turn led to racial discrimination. But history doesn't support this order of cause and effect. Economic, political and cultural self-interest drove powerful Americans to create and promote racist ideas. These ideas reduce social resistance to discriminatory policies and practices that serve those elites. Modern-day politicians have, for example, promoted the notion of personal responsibility to conceal the true causes of racial inequities. Racism in America has run along 2 tracks: assimilationism and segregationism. Segregationists often point to biology as the source of black people's alleged inferiority. In the 17th century, Christian segregationists believed in polygenesis, that God created white people and non-white people in separate acts of creation. Thus, black people were stamped from the beginning, with inequality, in former Senator Jefferson Davis's words, and nothing can change this. In the early 20th century, eugenicists formulated intelligence tests that purported to demonstrate blacks' intellectual inferiority. A few decades later, physical anthropologists posited the existence of biological races that they claimed differed mentally and temperamentally. In the 1950s, with discoveries in genetics, segregationists argued that Africans possessed inferior genes. Assimilationists usually see black people as culturally and behaviorally, rather than biologically, inferior to white people. They believe black people have the potential to become equal, through their own efforts or by experiencing the effects of an uplifting environment. Assimilationists pressure black people to emulate and imitate white people, adopt white culture and distance themselves from black or African culture. They see black cultures as inferior or pathological. Anti-racists, in contrast, attribute racial disparities to discrimination alone. They see black physical attributes and black and African cultures as equal to white cultures and attributes. American anti-racism dates back to 1688, when Mennonites issued the Germantown Petition Against Slavery, a tract that argued against slavery on the grounds of the Golden Rule. To achieve reform, anti-racists promote appealing to the self-interest of those in power to curb discrimination. True, long-term change will come only when upstanding anti-racists hold positions of power. Anti-racism has made strides in America, but so has racism. New racist ideas have often emerged when people in power wanted to deflect burgeoning resistance to racist policies. For example, after the U.S. Congress passed the Slave Trade Act of 1807, imposing fines on illegal slave traders and ending the international slave trade, domestic trade continued. And the following year, a court in South Carolina ruled that enslaved mothers had no rights with regard to their children, being on the same footings as other animals. Other examples abound. Congress passed a Civil Rights Act in 1875 making racial discrimination illegal, but the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional in 1883. Southern blacks gained the vote in 1867, and the 15th Amendment extended suffrage to all black men in 1869, but after 1890, literacy tests prevented many blacks from exercising their franchise. Meanwhile, as a method of intimidating blacks and bringing them back under white control, lynchings became commonplace during the 1880s. After the Civil Rights Movement, the racist intentions behind discriminatory policies became veiled, but those policies, and their resultant disparities, continue. 3 main strategies to eradicate racist ideas have all failed. Americans who oppose racist ideas have attempted 3 main strategies. In the first, self-sacrifice, reformers appeal to whites to sacrifice their privilege, under the assumption that this would benefit black people. The self-sacrifice strategy hasn't worked because it relies on a mistaken premise, that racism benefits most white Americans. It doesn't. Anti-black racism, along with many other forms of bigotry, benefits only a handful of elites. An appeal to whites' intelligent self-interest would have more effect. As long as racial discrimination exists, other forms of discrimination will persist as well. Racial reformers have been pushing the second strategy, uplift suasion, since the late 18th century. Uplift suasion means black people uplifting themselves on the assumption that white people, observing blacks' upstanding behavior and accomplishments, will abandon racial beliefs. But, when black individuals have defied white expectations and become well-educated, well-dressed, intellectually or creatively accomplished, or upwardly mobile, this has only caused animosity. Or whites see accomplished black people as exceptions to the rule. Uplift suasion makes black people responsible for whites' racist beliefs. And it has never worked. Reformers have also attempted educational persuasion to change racist beliefs, on the assumption that racist beliefs spring from mistakes about facts. But again, this strategy ignores the fact that elites promote racist ideas to control blacks and whites alike and to justify racist policies that benefit themselves. Reformers should focus on dismantling racial discrimination. They should remove discrimination as a means by which elites can pursue their self-interest and should create conditions in which anti-racist change becomes favorable to the elite's self-interest. In the long term, racism will end only when anti-racists come into power. Racist ideas came to America with the first British colonizers. The first record of anti-black racist ideas appeared in the mid-15th century, when the Portuguese writer Gomes Enes de Zurara defended Prince Henry's African slave trading. Zurara claimed the Portuguese slavers were saving Africans from religious and physical disaster. The racist ideas that Zurara put forward circulated widely as enslavers from Spain, Holland, France and England turned to the Portuguese for information about Africa. Captain John Smith, who led the establishment of the first permanent English settlement in North America in 1607, echoed racist ideas about Africans in his popular books. The Puritans' Christian beliefs about hierarchy, along with the ancient Greek notion of inferiority, allowed them to accept the enslavement of North American indigenous and African people. In 1636, the Puritan minister John Cotton, grandfather of Cotton Mather, wrote enslavement into New England's first constitution. The most celebrated abolitionists and anti-racists in American history have themselves harbored racist ideas. Abraham Lincoln could speak movingly on the abolitionist cause, yet he opposed equality, fought against blacks' voting rights, and considered the white race superior. Lincoln considered the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 primarily as a tactic to help end the Civil War and save the Union. Barack Obama, an assimilationist, voiced many racist ideas in his speeches and even produced a new racist theory, the legacy of defeat theory, whereby young blacks lacked jobs or went to jail because racial discrimination had created defeatism in them. Obama dismissed anti-racists as merely angry. Barack Obama's election as America's president didn't transform the United States into a post-racial society. After Barack Obama's keynote address at the 2004 Democratic National Convention and the publication of his memoir, also in 2004, American racists began to come out in his support. They applauded him, first, because they viewed him as an extraordinary Negro, who, as such, didn't upset their racist beliefs. Racists also applauded Obama because his candidacy gave them an opening to proclaim the end of racism in America. If racism no longer existed, society could dismantle laws and policies protecting civil rights. It meant racists could plausibly deny their racism, the racist intent of policies and the racist causes of disparities. Cotton Mather, Thomas Jefferson, William Lloyd Garrison, W.E.B. Du Bois and Angela Davis helped shape America's racial history. Cotton Mather, a wildly popular preacher in colonial Boston, argued that slaves' station in life resulted from God's will, and that slaves were better off than they would have been as free people. Mather advocated the Christianization of slaves, as, he preached, this would reduce their tendency to rebel and would uplift them. An assimilationist, Mather believed that black people had the potential to become white, at least spiritually. Thomas Jefferson served as America's president from 1801 to 1809. Influenced by Enlightenment ideas, Jefferson opposed slavery and saw the end of slavery as inevitable. As drafter of the Declaration of Independence, he penned the line, "All men are created equal," prompting Massachusetts and Vermont to end slavery. But Jefferson never believed in the actual equality of all people. On the one hand, he advocated slaves' education, emancipation and the return of Africans to Africa, but he also considered blacks intellectually deficient. Jefferson died in 1826 owning 200 slaves. William Lloyd Garrison, an anti-slavery assimilationist, began to call for immediate emancipation in 1829. Garrison edited the influential Boston newspaper The Liberator for 35 years, shaping history by framing abolition in stark moral terms. Yet throughout his career, he promoted the notion that black people had become inferior through the effects of oppression, and he opposed immediate equality. Black scholar W.E.B. Du Bois gained early acclaim for a paper that blamed former slaves, immorality, crime and laziness, for racial conflict. His work centered on academic study and teaching until 1910, when he dedicated himself to activism. By the mid-1930s, Du Bois' views had evolved to anti-racist socialism. Martin Luther King called Du Bois an intellectual giant, whose vision pierced the poisonous fog of lies that depicted black people as inferior. Philosopher and black feminist activist Angela Davis became engaged in activism by the age of 16. A member of the Communist Party from 1968, she gained notoriety 2 years later when the FBI declared her wanted in connection with the deaths of 4 men in Marin County. She spent more than a year in jail awaiting trial. After her acquittal, she dedicated herself to freeing prisoners of the penal system. Davis became a powerful voice for anti-racism in America, particularly for black women and prison abolition. The notion of black inferiority is a convenient excuse for racist policies and attitudes. For centuries, racists have promoted the idea that something is wrong with black people. They have called black people lazy, stupid, dangerous, slavish, backward, immoral and so forth. According to racist thinking, this inferiority has justified the enslavement, segregation and incarceration of black people. Racist Americans have held up the results of discriminatory policies, including wealth disparities and incarceration rates, as the results of black inferiority. Racist thinking pervades current notions about black people, such as the idea that black neighborhoods suffer from high crime rates, that black fathers often abandon their families, or that welfare has created dependency among black recipients. In reality, high crime rates correlate with high unemployment neighborhoods. Racial differences vanish when analyses take employment rates into account. Among all racial groups, black fathers turn out to be the most likely to maintain contact with their children, when they don't live in the same home as their children. No evidence exists for welfare engendering dependency, but racists have used the idea in recent years to justify cuts in welfare and calls for greater personal responsibility among blacks, echoing slaveholders who justified enslavement on the basis of blacks' imputed dependency. Thanks for watching. Check out our other video summaries of these books and make sure to subscribe.